Okay, so basically we started yesterday a very important topic from this chapter 6 that's called as protein synthesis and nucleic acid, and that chapter have a very important topic that is called as that how we can say that uh, there is a semi-conservative kind of DNA application. So how we are going to find this out? We have basically very important these two names. You need to remember them. That was Matthew Melson and Franklin Slaw. So we also used to use their last names, and we used to term them as Slaw and Melson. Experiment. That's going to tell you the conservation model of this E. coli was used in it. That's a bacteria which is present in your gut all the time. And I hope you remember we discussed in the last class that we are going to basically take these two E. coli in two different mediums or sources, in which one we used N15, that was a heavier isotope, and in other we basically allowed them to divide and divide for many generations. So first of all, step one was that we allowed this E. coli in the nutrient material, which was containing the heavier isotope of nitrogen. And then we shifted after many generations into the next beaker, which was containing this N14. Okay, that was the lighter isotope. And as you already know, I have already told you that your bacteria is going to replicate or divide by binary fission after every 20 to 30 minutes. So it means that after many generations, we can use this bacteria for this experiment. So what they did, we discussed yesterday that I'm just quickly swiping those slides which we have already done in the previous lecture. So this is the same thing, but here I would like you to remind one important thing, and that is the use of this centrifuge machine. I hope you remember we discussed that. It's called as centrifuge machine, and it's very much important for basically changing, or you can say that for extraction of the organelles. And one principle for this centrifuge machine is that denser will always, whatever the denser thing will, it will always sink first. Okay, so on this basis, we are basically revolving or spinning this centrifuge machine, and we use the samples in the test tube, and then we extract it from both the heavier and lighter isotope DNA. And at the last, I'm just going to repeat again that the heavier DNA that was closer to the bottom first, and it came to rest first. Obviously, the heavier one was this. Okay. So we discussed here in the last lecture, and then we wanted to discuss from here. So have a look again. Let's revise again the all the conclusion of that how we can say that your DNA is replicating semi-conservatively. So the first step was that bacteria was grown in N14 medium over here, and the second, you tried to grow them in different medium. That was the heavier one, means N15 medium, and then you shifted them from lighter to heavier or from heavier to lighter. You can do it both. Like, we basically want to compare the two. So bacteria are transferred to N14 medium, and then samples were removed at different intervals. So it's it can be N15 here and it can be N14 over here. It was first grown in heavier, and then it was transferred to the lighter one. And what we did, we basically after generation, after 2 generations, after 3 generations, we basically extracted the DNA from the bacteria, and we know that this is called as plasmid. That's a ring shaped separate DNA in different bacteria, which are also used in biotechnology and even for the production of insulin as well. I hope you remember from your O levels. Okay, so the extracted DNA was basically put in this test tube, which will be run in the centrifuge machine. Here you can see that we are showing you the assemblage of the centrifuge machine. So this DNA suspension was basically run, you can say we use the word RPM, that's called as revolution per minute. And what will happen, the heavier will obviously rest first at the bottom. So here you have a look. We had, in one test tube that was control having lighter isotope, and the parent which was having basically the strands which were having the heavier isotope, And the third generation which we got, that was the F1 generation, when we started that DNA, we came to know importantly one thing, that one of these strand, if I'm showing you like this, one of these strand was from the parent and there was a newly synthesized strand over there as well. So it kind of giving us a hybrid, one was N15, other was N14 strand, and this was giving us a hybrid DNA molecule. Okay, that was on the F1 generation, you need to remember it. And then we allowed this to replicate further for F2 generation. It's for you, I think you remember from the genetics chapter, but it's called as first filial generation, then comes the second filial generation. These are basically the offsprings of this parental generations. So we kept on replicating the same DNA, and you can see from the second filial generation, we got that the 50% they were light and 50% we were having the hybrid one. So we can imagine that this one is N14, okay, and this one was the mixing of N14 plus N15. Okay, now this was the second generation, you can say, conclusion. And then we repeatedly, allowed them to replicate, because by binary fission, we are getting the generation after every 20 minutes for two daughter cells. What we got over here, can you see? That 75%, look at here, 75% it was having the lighter one. And look at this one, it was only 25% it was having both N14 plus N15. Now, what the conclusion can be made? Okay, just keep in mind that this hybrid is the one which is having one DNA copy from heavier isotope. You can say that it could be N15, and the other copy that basically I'm labeling it with the opposite colors. Let me label it first. So if I'm labeling this, as N15, then the other strand, which I'm talking about, the hybrid one, this one, the complementary strand, the newly synthesized strand, that was of N14. So this is the one, this DNA is going to be the hybrid. While you can see that in the last generation, after generation after generation, generation after generation, what happened? That you got 75% of the lighter isotopes, nitrogen. So what was the conclusion on the basis of all this result? That we need to remember, because this question usually comes in the exam as well. Okay, that usually comes for the exam for this description, that how you can prove that. Let me just go back again, that this is called as semi-conservative replication. Now, with this result, do you agree that even it's half still conserve the parental, nitrogen over here? Do you agree with this thing? So on the basis of this result, we can say it's not fully conservative. It's not dispersed even. You remember there were three kinds of, suggestions regarding, let me go back to those suggestions as well, which, there was about the DNA application. Let me just quickly swipe back. There were three basically suggestions on this, that, let's look at this. There were three suggestions that there could be three patterns for DNA replication. Look at this. This was the dispersive pattern. Okay. Then there was a conservative, fully conservative pattern. And then there was a semi-conservative pattern. So I hope you remember we did it already. That's semi-conservative. Semi means one strand will be the old one and the other one will be the new one. And fully conservative means that whole one double helical DNA will be of the parental DNA, while the daughter will be entirely different from the parental one. So this is the three possibilities of replication. But after this experiment, let me go back to the experiment conclusion. We concluded after generation, after using this, isotopes of nitrogen from cesium chloride solution, that this replication of DNA is basically semi-conservative, that is going to conserve the previous old one DNA strand as well. Got it? Okay, so next thing which you need to remember is about genes and mutation. Now, the bacteria E. coli, you can see this is the plasmid of E. coli. Okay, we have just shown you the electron microscope of that. Okay, this is only a single one DNA molecule, this whole ring-like structure. This whole ring-like, this is a ring-like structure of plasma. How many base pair long? It's 4 million base pair long. This one molecule of DNA is going to be 4 million base pair longs. So the total DNA of human cell is roughly estimated that it's going to be 3 into 10 to the power 9 bases long. That's the information you need to remember. This is this much long, but it's thought that only 3% of this DNA is actually going to code for the protein. And what is the function of remainder? Still uncertain. So you need to remember from this page, this important thing, that we are having this much long DNA, but only out of this, 3% is going to contain the code for the gene. You can now have a look on this slide. You can see that a part of DNA molecule that's going to only, let's suppose I'm talking about here. Let's suppose it's G, and the pairing of it will be always C, and then come A, the pairing will always with T, and you know that in between they are going to have bonds, double bond for A to T, and there will be triple bonds for G to C. Okay. So if I'm talking about the sequence of these nucleotides, your part of DNA, only one part of DNA, that will code only for one polypeptide, only one polypeptide, and that part is called as a gene, single gene. Okay, so I hope you remember from the structure of chromatid and chromosome. You remember that there are different loci. Loci means the position. This is called as, let's suppose, a homologous chromosome. Then exactly here, the gene will be, if this is a gene for skin color, then similarly, the sister chromosome will also have the same loci for the skin color. Okay. If here you are having gene for the height, then similarly, the loci will be here for the height. If this is the gene for your blood groups, then similarly, the loci for here will be the blood groups. Okay. So these genes are basically what? They are basically the codes which you are getting from your parents. So what we are talking about DNA molecule, one DNA molecule, which may contain many genes. But if you find some change in this nucleotide sequence of gene, we'd use the term called as mutation. So we use a term called as sudden change or abrupt change in the gene code is called as mutation. And you know that most genes have, different variants. We are having, Anna, you are joining from another number, I guess, another name. Is there any problem with your system?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, progress.
So most genes, they have several different variants that's called as alleles. What is allele? Do you remember? That we used to call in O levels that if you are having this, form of one gene, then the alternative form of the gene is called as its allele. Do you remember how many types of alternative form of one gene we can have? We can have homozygous recessive. Remember from your O levels? Homozygous recessive. Okay, then we had heterozygous dominant. And then there is a third one that's called as homozygous dominant. Okay, if you remember, for homozygous recessive, let's suppose I'm talking about red color, and capital letter is for the dominant behavior, small letter is for the recessive. So this is going to be the recessive homozygous. What about heterozygous dominant? That will be this code. And what about homozygous dominant? That will be having both the capital letters. So I hope you remember these are the alternative form of a gene which we called as alleles. So one allele can have different forms of gene. It can be homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and heterozygous dominant. So sometimes what happens that there is some other change in the gene which arises by the mutation. And that obviously are found, these genes are basically found on the chromosomes. Okay, here is just a mnemonic to tell you that there can be different type of mutation. Substitution, insertion, deletion, and inversions. So we will be discussing in detail that what these different kinds of alleles can be. But for just your memory, let's have a look again. This is, different forms of genes for color. Let's suppose we are talking about a petal color. Okay, you can look at the locus. The same locus is for the flower color. Here, if I change the locus, I might have this over here, the locus of for maybe for the pod shape or height. Okay, so these are different characteristics. So they have the same locus for the homologous chromosome, but obviously the genes must be the same over here, but they can have the alternative form of a similar gene. So if this is the allele for purple color, you can say there is a gene which is going to be have the color for white flower. So you got the alternative form. So I can give them, some genetic names for them as well. Let's suppose we are using capital P, then small p will be used for the recessive trait over here. So this is for capital T and this is for the recessive character. I hope you remember the Mendelian genetics. Okay. What happens if there is a slight change? Then obviously, the activities of cells can be disturbed, like sickle cell anemia. We'll be discussing just in a while. So the question comes in our mind that how can a single type of molecule like DNA can control all the activities of your cell? That's very important. You need to remember that all the reactions in the cells are controlled by enzymes. And we need to remember that enzymes are protein in nature. And what is the monomer for any protein? That's called as amino acids. And you just remember that amino acids are basically what they are, basically, some codes. Like I told you that UAUG, that's the start of, you can say that replication thing. That's August. I used to say that your session starts from August, but it can be code for the methionine. That's an important amino acid. So DNA is code for protein, thus controlling that which protein must be made. So in other words, we can say that if we have to make the proteins, it means that DNA is going to control the cell activities. It means it is controlling basically proteins, in other words, enzymes. So important thing you need to remember about protein is that it is made up of the strings of amino acid. And obviously the shape, the behavior of protein is going to depend exactly the sequence of these amino acids we use to term as codons. So basically, what DNA do then? So here the answer comes for this question. That DNA is going to basically control the protein structure by determining the exact order in which the amino acid must join together when proteins are made in a cell. And we are going to discuss that in detail again, that how it's going to make. First of all, you need to remember the triplet code, which we use to term the codon. So the sequence of nucleotides in a DNA molecule is basically a code for the sequence for what? For amino acids in a polypeptide. Okay, here, codon 1, AUG for methionine, codon 2, codon 3, codon 4, 5, 6. So what it is, this section is giving you one codon, second codon, third codon, fourth codon. What are these? These are codes for the amino acids. Okay, here, look at the replication. I told you already that it's going to always start from 5' to 3'. This is called as a sense strand, and this is called the anti-sense strand, which will be the anti-parallel to it. Look, it started from 3' to 5', so that the sequence can be having complementary pairing with one another, And how the code is going to read? It's going to read in this direction, from here to here. So if I'm giving you one strand code, I'm writing here G, C, A, T. You can give me the code for the complementary strand. You can tell me why, because you know that always guanine pairs up with cytosine. Cytosine always pair up with guanine. Adenine always pair up with thymine. Thymine always pair up with adenine. So the second code I can also make the antisense strand as well. So in conclusion, what we say about the codon, that it's a 3-letter code, 3 bases, which gives us the code for 1 amino acid. So you need to remember the other thing, that sequence is always read in the same direction and from only one of the 2 strands. Any one strand can be read, okay? And we used to term that strand as sense because we are sensing it. Let's suppose this is the sense strand. Can you see how from where it started? From 5' to 3'. So the complementary strand, you can see in the purple color, the complementary strand, that's called as antisense. I hope you remember when helicase is going to unzip the, unzipping the DNA. I hope you remember that it's going to act over here and unzip the DNA molecule. And then you remember the DNA polymerase, what they are going to do basically, they are going to assemble the complementary strands, nucleotides, free nucleotides, which were activated by the addition of the phosphates. I hope you remember the last topic we did. So it means that this is from here, if I'm highlighting it. So this one is called as sense strand. Okay, what will be the antisense strand then? This one. And what other thing you need to remember is it always starts from 5' to 3'. Then it is going to start from 3' to 5', which were the antisense, starting from 3' to 5'. Okay, now what about messenger RNA? Okay, what about messenger RNA? Now for meanwhile, you just need to remember one thing. Can you check that messenger RNA? I hope you remember in the process of protein synthesis, this is a cell, this is a nucleus. The DNA cannot come out of the nucleus. What it sends a newly synthesized strand, which is called as messenger RNA, and this is called as basically transcription. So it's going to read the transcription from which strand? Now, can you check which strand messenger RNA basically transcribed or translate? You can say, in other words, checked. It's basically RNA. And you need to remember that in RNA, which is a single strand, there is always base pairing for A is to U, not for T, because thymine is for DNA. So you can see that here, you can see that the strand which is messenger RNA is going to have the code for U now. For this? No, for this. C to G, C to G, T to A, and then again, here we will not find T anywhere. No T over here. So instead of T, what we are having? uracil. I'm giving you 1 second to check that have this messenger RNA copied very well, the antisense strand. Have the, complementary strand which was made, newly synthesized one, is really copied well. And all the complementary base pairs are over here with this rule that guanine will always pair up with 3 hydrogen bonds to cytosine, and adenine will always pair up with 2 bonds. But now, because we are talking about RNA, so we are talking about uracil over here. I hope you have seen and you have observed it clearly. Okay, now we are moving back to DNA. This is the key. You can see that this is DNA. Okay, and DNA, whose strand? That was the antisense strand, the template, the one which is newly synthesized. Okay, now we are done with the DNA replication. DNA replication is completed by the action of the DNA polymerase. Now what we are heading toward? We are heading toward the protein synthesis. The first step of protein synthesis is basically coming the messenger RNA out of the nucleus after taking all the message from the antisense strand. You can now have a look that in this double-stranded DNA, there will be only one strand which will be used for the RNA code. And that will be basically translated into protein later. And that's called as antisense, the newly synthesized strand. So that the strand that does not code for RNA is called as sense strand over here. But sense strand was code for the antisense while DNA replication. Okay, so don't confuse these things. Now we are talking about the protein synthesis. We are not talking about right now DNA replication. So this is the first step for protein synthesis. First step, which is happening inside the nucleus, inside. Okay, so the DNA is not coming out from the nucleus. The DNA is sending its messenger in the form of RNA, in the form of a code. Or we can say that another way for defining this antisense DNA is that it's the strand of DNA that carries the information for necessary making proteins, and it's going to basically prepare a new RNA strand that's called as messenger RNA. So exactly they are exactly mirror image for one another, because if anti strand is going to have guanine, the messenger will have cytosine. Okay, that will obviously, if this will be replicated, obviously if it will be further, let's suppose C will go over here, and if it is interpreted, then the next strand could have guanine for that. So the sense strand does not help in making of messenger RNA. Okay, that's not going to make the RNA, messenger RNA. So you need to remember which one is acting as a template for protein synthesis. That is the antisense strand, which you just synthesized, which you just had after the DNA replication. This is a simple thing. From DNA, it cannot come out from the nucleus. You need to remember it have to prepare its messenger. Its data must be transcribed by someone, and that data will be carried out from the nucleus, and that process will be then later in the form of protein synthesis. That will be called as, this data will be translated later by the tRNA. Okay, if you look at this picture, you can see that the first step was basically the DNA replication and having the antisense strand. Okay, so this is here, it was DNA replication was happening. It was the starting of your interface. So here DNA replication took place. After DNA replicated, this anti-strand is going to act as a template for the messenger RNA. Look at here, messenger RNA. Now can you check again? Anti-strand, anti-strand. Can you see the complementary base pair? So this part from anti-strand to messenger RNA, this part is called as transcription, the first step of protein synthesis. Now this messenger RNA is coming out from the nucleus, and it's going to basically work on the ribosomes, where it's present in the cytoplasm, and we are having two RNA for its help, that is tRNA, transfer RNA, and there will be a ribosomal RNA. I hope you remember that topic when we discuss the function of these two. So tRNA, I hope you remember we discussed that it's going to have a clover leaf kind of a structure, and it's going to have here anticodon, and here it's going to have the amino acid, this part. Okay, so this tRNA with anticodon is going to be here. So look at here. I told you that AUG is the code for amino acid called as methionine. Can you see? AUG, methionine. Okay, then you are having glycine. Look at here. Leucine. Look at here. So this is going to be three code for each protein. For each, amino acid. And you know that one protein can have more than one polypeptides, or it can be a single polypeptide thing. Now we are discussing a very important example of mutation. We are still, we need to still discuss in detail the DNA, protein synthesis. But before going to protein synthesis, I want to tell you the accuracy you need for the copy, or you can say you need for the transcription. I hope you remember in O levels, you have already studied that this is one of the very important X-linked inheritance diseases. Okay, this is sex-linked or X-linked chromosome disease that's called as sickle cell anemia. Single mutation, only a single mutation in one gene code will carry the significant effect. Can you see? Look at the shape. This is the formation of sickle cell red blood cell. This is the normal. You don't have nucleus in the later and mature RBC. Why? Because you want to carry more hemoglobin in it so that more and more oxygen can bind to it. So you can have more oxyhemoglobin. But look at here. Can you see that now the surface area is reduced? Number one. Number two, it can stuck to the capillaries. It can basically stuck to the capillaries and it can basically inhibit the flow of the blood, which can even cause to death as well. So what is hemoglobin? That's a red pigment. We'll discuss later in the chapter called as transport in mammals, okay, which carry the oxygen around the body. And that's very much present in this biconcave disc-like structure. Hemoglobin is basically made up of 4 polypeptide chains. So that is 2 alpha, okay, and 2 beta chains. If I'm highlighting it with different colors, I can highlight like this. Like these are 2 alpha, okay, and have a look that they are 2 beta. And what they are having inside this chain is heme group. Heme group is kind of a prosthetic group inside it. And the function of this heme group is basically going to help you to make the carrying of the oxygen, basically. This is going to help you out there. And we'll discuss this in detail when we will be discussing the chapter transport in mammals. So here, look at the structure of hemoglobin. We'll discuss later in detail, but right now you need to know that this is red blood cell erythrocyte, and only one of the hemoglobin is shown to here, where there are millions of hemoglobin in it, but one of it is shown to you. So these are basically alpha chains. These two are the beta chains. So I can say that there are 4 polypeptide chains. What will be the single unit in it? That will be amino acid. As you know that your polypeptide is just like a necklace for you. The pearls inside the necklace, this one whole necklace is going to act as a polypeptide. And what will be this single monomer? The single monomer will be amino acid. So this is kind of a polypeptide. And we are talking here about 4 polypeptide, this kind of 4 polypeptide. 2 will be similar in this way and 2 will be similar in this way. We'll discuss later what is the difference in alpha and beta sheets. Anyways, right now you need to remember this, that the gene which is coding for the amino acid sequence in beta polypeptide is not same in everyone. In most of the people, the beta polypeptide, if I am not wrong, I must draw that 4 polypeptides over here. That's better for you to remember. So these 2 are alpha, okay, and these 2 are beta, and we are talking about beta here. So this is basically from a normal hemoglobin. You can check. It starts from valine, histine, leucine, okay. So these are all the names for the amino acids we are having. But look at here. In some people, the code, this CTT, is replaced by only, look at only 1 digit over here, 1 digit. Instead of CTT, okay, instead of, which is basically code for the glutamic acid, instead of that, you can see that it's going to be replaced by A over here. And now this CAT is the code for valine. I repeat, in this, after proline, you have glutamic acid. But for mutation in sickle cell anemia, what happened, instead of glutamic acid, which is having this code, this single 1 alphabet of the amino acid change by mutation, and you get the amino acid called as valine in the chain of the code for the polypeptide chain for beta polypeptide.